What's up, everybody? It's FYGP, and today I've got another movie review for you guys. It's about the Napoleon 2023 movie. I already did a trailer review of that movie, but now I actually watched the full movie, and I've got to say the least, I'm very disappointed in the movie because it could have been done so much better. Never mind all of the historical inaccuracies and just complete rewriting of history and major battles in the Napoleonic Wars. The film was shallow. It offered no explanations for the course of events in Napoleon's life, and it just rushed through. It just felt rushed. So, for example, it starts off with the execution of Marie Antoinette. I already talked about all of the inaccuracies surrounding that scene. Now, Napoleon is present at that scene. That never happened. He was not present at the execution of Marie Antoinette, but I can understand if you want to include that for dramatic effect. Then they move on to Robespierre and his ouster and eventual execution, except they make it seem as if Robespierre died on the spot when in fact he was only injured on the spot. Some say by a self inflicted gunshot wound, some say that a member of the parliament shot Robespierre. So that's disputed. They went with the one that he shot himself, but he died on the spot. So that's not historically accurate. Here's Robespierre, right? And there's a scene where he gets assassinated. Here, Napoleon is discussing how he can, take Toulon again, the port of Toulon, and he is basically using all the scrap metal cannons. Now, what is this here? This is absolutely ridiculous. Napoleon goes several times in this movie. He goes on some Assassin's Creed type reconnaissance missions, which is not what he was doing. He had scouts that would do that and bring the news to him. But apparently you gotta do this just to make it more dramatic. So yeah, he also here he's on a sort of Assassin's Creed sort of mission, which he never was doing. Of course, that's just complete nonsense. But never mind that. Yeah, here we actually go to the execution, or like not the execution, to the death of Robespierre. So what happens is that he runs away, he points a gun at someone, but then actually shoots himself in the head, and he dies on the spot, which is not what happened because he survived this wound and then was later executed. So, yeah, the end of the Reign of Terror. None of these events are sufficiently explained. None of these events are, I feel like they're related to the story at all. But at least they did a good job regarding the aesthetics of the 19th century Paris and so on. We jump to the royalist revolt that Napoleon was sent to suppress, and we also get a bunch of scenes with Josephine, of course, and we also get Josephine's son, who weirdly enough he wasn't included anymore in the movie except for this scene where Napoleon brings a sword of his dad, who was a victim of the Reign of Terror, and eventually, but actually, the son of Josephine served under Napoleon once he turned 18. So you should have included that, how he served as well in the French army. But the only scene that they have is him as a child, which is weird. I don't know why even include that if you're not going to talk about him later and how he followed his stepdad into his campaigns and so on. Here we have all of the love scenes, all of the like romantic scenes between Josephine and Napoleon seem completely awkward. It's just so weird and like unnatural for some reason. You got a bunch of dialogue between them, which could have better been spent perhaps explaining some of the events that happened. there's so many cringe scenes in the movie. Oh yeah, here's the suppression of the royalist revolt. And I already talked about the inaccuracies in my trailer review, so we're just gonna skip that. Uh, Here he gets married to Josephine, and he cheats on Napoleon. I think that's what happens here. But what they and then all of a sudden he's in Egypt, as if those two events were related. So they always show how Josephine is like cucking Napoleon, but that's not the case because Napoleon had plenty of lovers himself. So once he in fact found out about the affair of Josephine, he just slept with another woman. So like it's not like Miss Napoleon was loyal while Josephine was hoeing around. Actually, they were both had lovers and had affairs throughout their marriage. So that's completely historically inaccurate. So they want to paint Napoleon as this weak kind of man who submits to his woman. And even you even got a scene where like Josephine says, "Repeat after me. Without me, you're nothing. You're just a tiny little prude." So and he repeats that. That obviously never happened. Probably, if Josephine would have said something like that, Napoleon would have spanked her. Back then, men were actually not weaklings like today. So, but that's just a Hollywood feminism agenda that you got to push through. This is the most ridiculous scene. Napoleon never fired at the pyramids. And the funniest thing is that this Mameluke rider, he actually falls off his horse for some reason once the artillery is fired, which Mamelukes were really good horse riders, so I don't think that that would occur. Just a small thing to point out. They just did that for dramatic effect. Um, so Josephine, I think, cheating on Napoleon right here. They always got to include that while he's in Egypt. And there we have a scene where he opens a sarcophagus of some pharaoh. For some reason, the serfs in Egypt are completely sub-Saharan African. They are completely black in Egypt. I don't know why exactly that is the case, because they were Arabs, of course. Perhaps those are some serfs that Napoleon brought with him from sub-Saharan Africa, but yeah, I don't know why they're sub-Saharan African. I don't understand. So behind you see actually General Dumas, who was a participant in the Egypt campaign. I'm glad they included him. Now he just stares at the sarcophagus for some reason. I don't know what exactly the message of this scene was. We move on. So yeah, here's General Dumas, who was a Thomas Alexandre Dumas, who was African, well, black. He was black. He was from Haiti. So glad that they included him. Uh, that's interesting. But he also is later on seen participating in the coup, which he did not do. So that's another historical inaccuracy. He returns to France, but nowhere is it mentioned that he left his army behind. Nowhere is that mentioned. Perhaps you could have included that to highlight how Napoleon's glory came at the cost of thousands of soldiers that he left behind. Perhaps you should have highlighted that. Yeah, we go on. They have a fight because he was cheating and so on. And he's like distraught and so on. And here he says, without me, you're nothing. You're just a tiny little prude. Obviously, the big feminism agenda here in the Hollywoods. It's obvious the men have to be painted as weak and so on. So that's why you have that. There he talks to the British. Got some meetings and so on. I think his foreign minister, Talleyrand, also shows up somewhere. And yeah, but overall, I don't recommend this movie at all, actually. I think it's terrible. I think it did a disservice to the whole story. It didn't paint it accurately. It didn't paint the personality of Napoleon accurately. They have all of these weird sort of sex scenes with Josephine. It's like, I don't know, it's just weird. I don't know. Um, so here we have the Battle of Austerlitz. They completely butchered that one. Napoleon was not hiding in the forest, and the Allies did not advance over a frozen lake. That is not what occurred. That's just complete nonsense. They butchered the Battle of Austerlitz. Plus, the tactics of the 19th century in this movie are completely wrong. None of these battles were conducted in a manner shown as shown in the movie. Here we go. He defeats the Russians and Austrians, and then there's several scenes with Josephine, who is meanwhile divorced with him, and because he won't bear him an heir. And all of a sudden, we jump pretty much from his coronation. I think his coronation comes also into play right here. I think you got that. But immediately you jump from the Russia campaign, even though there were plenty of wars between that, the campaign in Prussia and so on. And the Russia campaign is explained away by the. Oh, yeah, first we have the meeting at Tilsit between Napoleon and Alexander. I think they are meeting at the middle of a lake, like is historically accurate. No, they did not do that. But they actually met in the middle of a river, which is not what they did in this scene. They met at some field, so that's historically inaccurate as well. But I guess that dialogue right there is a bit more historically accurate than the rest of the movie's dialogues. And without any explanation, the next scene, 5 minutes after, Napoleon is already invading Russia. And there's the Battle of Borodino. In the Battle of Borodino, Napoleon is seen charging alongside his cavalry, which is ridiculous, which never happened. Napoleon, as many times mentioned before, did not fight in battles. He commanded them from afar. Then he marches into Moscow. I think that was quite accurately done. The shock of Napoleon that nobody's there to hand him the keys of the city, and the realization that the city is abandoned, as well as when the Moscow burst up in flames, and his dead soldiers being frozen, and so on, and some atrocities that the Cossacks committed. So yeah, then but the completely ridiculous thing is that in the next scene, which 2 years passed from Napoleon's defeat in Russia to his demise and the occupation of Paris by Allied forces. No, in the movie, this is just a couple of seconds. One day he's in Russia, the next day he's forced to abdicate, which did not happen. There were 2 years of bloody fighting, including the Battle of Leipzig during that 2 year time period. So that's not the way it happened. Napoleon was far from defeated after he left Russia. But in this movie, he just gets exiled. I guess they really didn't have enough time to include all of that, so that's why they just glossed over huge swaths of history. So then the next scene, you got Napoleon returning from Elba, but nowhere is the iconic moment where he actually opened up his his coat and says, "Shoot me, shoot your emperor if you want to shoot him." Nowhere is that shown. Then you got the Brits and Wellington, who I mistakenly assumed was actually King George of England, and the Battle of Waterloo. Now, this is completely ridiculous. The battle is completely wrong. I would take an hour if I would explain all of the wrong things in those battles. But the most ridiculous thing about this is that apparently snipers are trying to take out Napoleon. That's completely ridiculous. That never happened. And that's just complete nonsense done for dramatic effect. As well as Napoleon, he never met Wellington after the Battle of Waterloo. That never happened. So just another complete historical inaccuracy. I would really, I don't know what type of grade I would give this movie. I would maybe give it a 3 out of 10. It wasn't engaging, it wasn't interesting. I don't care about historical inaccuracies, I don't care about that types of stuff too much, but at least make an interesting story and portray the character sort of right. They failed at both parts of that, so I give this movie maybe a 2.5 till a 3 out of 10. Otherwise, the bright things about it is pretty much just the uniforms and the whole 19th century aesthetics, as well as music that was actually done quite well. The costumes were great. So that's one upside. Other than that, I don't see many upsides with this movie. So yeah, that's it for me. See you guys another time. It's FYGP tuning out.